the process and the end product are equally as valuable.
I always considered like my filmmaking to be precious, and perfection was imperative. They just didn't make a lot of stuff.
I love connecting with people in the crowd. I feel like it's really me and you right now.
If you're an artist or creative who's looking to grow their following or get their work in front of a larger audience this year, you've come to the right place. I had a solid decade of spending a lot of my spare time trying to solve the problem of connecting the things that I was making with an online audience. And it was only about 18 months ago that I found something that started to gather some traction. So in this video, I'm going to go through everything I've learned myself on that journey, as well as bringing in a kind of mega mix of all my favorite online audience building advice that I've gathered along the way. And as always, if you have any of your own tips that you think might be valuable for some of the creatives watching this, or something that I or one of the artists brings up that resonates with you specifically, please do feel free to add it in below.
You had to be just a little bit more honest than you were comfortable with. And if people judged you, if they felt they knew who you were, that was just something that you were going to have to live with.
I hope you notice that this video doesn't carry a third-party sponsor advert, so allow me for a moment to mention my Patreon, where this week I'll be reading one of my favourite chapters from Still Like an Artist by Austin Kleon, as well as posting the audio podcast version of this video with added commentary as always. This work takes a lot of time and care to make, so if you're getting value from it, consider dropping the price of a coffee per month to support my ability to push forward and make more this year. Okay, peace, and let's jump back into it.
Last week I talked about that Voltaire quote, "Perfection is the enemy of good." And what that means is you can never let your desire for perfection prevent you from finishing something that's good. Because to finish something, even imperfectly, is to learn from it, and then you can move on and get closer to perfection.
A focus on iteration.
When you're bringing your ideas to life and distributing them to an audience, it's really useful to remember that almost 100% of artists that you see being all successful in the public eye didn't find that audience with their first project or the first format that they tried.
In the world that we're in, this peculiar world where we don't know what the rules are. Everything's changing. Do lots and lots of little trial projects. Send your trial balloons out. Absolutely be happy for 5 things that you do to fail. If one succeeds and one succeeds well. Just try more. Don't be locked down. I think that would be my big piece of advice.
Designers, we all have like or creators or artists, we have a natural convention to sort of be maybe tormented, or a little bit of like an inner struggle. Is the work living up to its fullest potential, or is it as great as the work that you idolize from your design idols? But at the end of the day, it's your body of work, and it's the amount of work and the refinement of that work that'll define who you are as a creative.
In his book, Still Like an Artist, Austin Kleon speaks of the value of this iterative technique. If I'd waited to know who I was or what I was before I started being creative, Kleon writes, well, I'd still be sitting around trying to figure myself out instead of making things. In my experience, it's in the act of making things and doing our work that we figure out who we are.
Perfectionism doesn't advance anything, ironically. As a creative and as a designer, there's no wrong way to go about the future of your career. The only failure is not to try.
Yeah, that key point for artists and creatives, to just keep trying to finish projects that you're proud of and put them out in some kind of structured way, is really going to be the backbone of finding something that eventually connects.
Giving myself this daily mandate to upload a video, it has forced me to abandon this idea of perfection, this false idea of perfection, and instead forced me to focus on productivity. And that, in aggregate, over time, has made me a much better filmmaker, has made me a much better storyteller, creator, all of that.
At the beginning, writing a blog post every day felt like a lot. And if someone had said, now you need to do it 7,000 times in a row, I probably would have pushed back. What the process is about is, I'm not going to decide that I'm not going to have a blog post tomorrow. I made that decision 20 years ago. There's going to be a blog post tomorrow. So now that decision is made, Doesn't matter what my intentions are. There's going to be a blog post tomorrow.
Picking the best pathway to break through.
So here we're going to think about how we can pick the right path to go down with our work and decide which ideas we should probably let go and which ones we should really spend time and invest in. As artists and creatives, it can be really tempting to want to just keep your head down and be protective of your process, especially when you're dealing with internal doubt and maybe even trying to overcome some negativity that's around you. But as we move through our projects and grow our skills, it is useful to keep our eyes out for what people are connecting to in that work and slowly try and move towards those things.
You're kind of taking it on the road and you're seeing that it's an idea that resonates, and then get everybody's take on these common experiences and then pick the very best one. So in a way, basically what I'm doing is kind of an ongoing field study that becomes whatever my next book is.
Which one of your SoundCloud beats has the most comments, and are people connecting with a certain section of that track? When you put a piece of artwork out on Instagram or show it to your friends, are they always discussing or bringing up a particular element? Or is there one story idea that you told a few people at a party, who since then, every one of them, whenever they see you, brings up how is the writing going with that? By slowly building up that understanding of how our work's being received, we can pick ourselves a path that moves towards those concepts or styles that people are going to relate to.
We are part of the equation, but the audience is, we're playing ping pong with an audience, right? That's what the internet is really great at. We throw something out, the audience reacts to it, and we understand, oh, interesting. That's what you guys like. That's what you didn't like. Okay, let me try this. Ooh, okay, now I just learned something new about you guys. Being a creator for the internet is a collaborative process with the audience.
Importantly, I'm not saying as an artist or creative, you should shy away from following your creative passion and making some weird shit. But a key thing that's going to increase your chance of finding that audience with your work is the ability to understand what people are relating to already and meeting them where they are.
Finding formulas to reach an audience that's already proven to be there.
Okay, the next 2 points kind of come together, and here we're going to be looking at how we can take practices that we love to engage in and use our skills to create things that are going to connect with an audience that we can already see is there.
I've heard tunes by SZA in which I'm challenged by like electronic synths and like, you know, futuristic stuff, and on the same side I hear harps and certain, you know, classical arrangements that remind me of Iran, of like, you know, the tradition of poetry in Iran, and to able to merge that together, that's something that resonates with me a lot.
Back to Still Like an Artist now, where Cleon tells us every new idea is just a mashup or remix of one or more previous ideas. Plagiarism is trying to pass someone else's work off as your own. Copying is about reverse engineering. It's like a mechanic taking apart a car to see how it works. These two pieces of advice work on the idea of watching the market that we're trying to break into and replicating some of the things that are already working there, whilst bringing a slight change that allows us to show off our own skill set or uniqueness and create some space and originality. And the first one for this is to replicate something that's super familiar to people and to add a twist slightly with our own specific areas of knowledge or creative passion.
I decided my fingerprint was how the work is positioned, you know, and I use this overriding sort of construct between tourist and purist to sort of categorize the type of work that I'm trying to do. You know, a purist can find value in meaning based on an underlying premise, whereas like a tourist has curiosity, ambition, and is willing to sort of seek out. It's the ability to say two things at one time.
Maybe you've written the best 64 bars of trap lyricism ever created and are struggling to find an audience with it until you remove the instrumental and replace it with some of those lo-fi study beats that have such a huge audience online. Or your passion and practice is in classic landscape oil painting, but you can't find any traction on Instagram until you start putting that supermarket buffet counter where you work in the center of the middle field of every scene. We can think of this practice as trying to make something palatable for the audience and bringing them in to our own style and what we do.
For me, on our channel, it's making these productions that we really believe in and we really enjoy making. Meanwhile, trying to mitigate that potential hurt of something not finding an audience. So it has to be, again, that balance of making something for us, but also making something for the people. And there's got to be a Venn diagram where that video sits right in the middle.
After you've built some connection and trust with that audience, there may be some opportunities, if you like, to slowly walk back and bring in those things that originally felt completely true to you.
I think that the second record was about deepening my sonical landscape. Yeah. Like, okay, now I understand the game. Now I want to play. So I could play more with my own style, make it more refined, go a little bit left, go a little bit right.
The second formula I wanted to discuss here has a lot of overlap with that first one, but is what we might call more of a full remix. This is simply about taking two things that people are aware of and that are already working in the online space and bringing them together. This is kind of what I think about with this channel, where in my most developed pieces, I'm bringing together educational content with the video essay online style that I love. But we could be talking about a social media creator who brings together hip hop dance trends with the makeup tutorials that they're trying to break through with. Or two house DJs who also like to cook and see some space for content to be made in that area. Again, I'm not asking us to be duplicitous or manipulative with what we're doing here. At the end of the day, doing these things is going to help us build our skills, and we can always take that back into creating work that is only purely for ourselves.
Strip it back and make it feel easy.
So with point number 5, we're moving on to a different kind of piece of advice now, and that's about finding a format that's going to be easy enough to execute on and finish, that you can make multiple versions of it and put it out in some kind of consistent and structured way.
What might this look like if it were easy? Right? What might this look like? If it were easy, if it had to be easy, if that were possible, what might it look like? How far can you ratchet down the scale until you have no excuses?
This is heavily linked to that concept we talked about before around the fact that the first thing is probably not going to hit. And the truth in the online space, which is that it can be pretty random in terms of what gets seen and what doesn't. And I think it's for that reason that I myself and a lot of creatives and artists struggle to find that audience, because we're often thinking about making that one single project that's going to define what we want to say. And that can be quite a problem, because when we're running our experiment and putting that out in the online space to see if it finds traction, we only have that single point of interaction that we're gathering any data on. Don't get me wrong, I'm not asking you to commit to making a whole year's worth of work with every project. But when we're developing that format that we're going to put our ideas and work into to try and distribute them online, it's useful to try and think about building something that we can make multiple finished versions of, that can be put out and distributed in some kind of pattern to increase the chance of them connecting and finding that audience.
Making it more elegant, maybe like Japanese flower arranger. It's like, okay, how many pieces can I remove while still like maintaining the essence of what I'm trying to achieve?
The real way to build meaningful space in the chaos.
I didn't want to be judged. I didn't want people reading any of my stories to know who I was or what I thought or to get in too close. And I realized that if you're going to write, if you're going to be a successful writer, at least if you're going to be the kind of writer who did the kind of stuff that I was going to do, you had to be willing to do the equivalent of walking down a street naked. You had to be able to show too much of yourself. You had to be just a little bit more honest than you were comfortable with. And if people judged you, if they felt they knew who you were, that was just something that you were going to have to live with.
So for point number 6, we're going to come back to another thing that I've spoken about a lot on this channel, and that's that key concern around trying to be real and speak honestly about our experience and our work. In the end, I think it's digging into our own honest experience that's really going to bring that uniqueness to our work, that's going to allow us to break through. When we're trying to fit into these familiar formats online, yes, this is going to come with some sense of copying or replicating in style or form. But that's not to say that we can't bring ourselves and our own uniqueness to that thing and avoid that danger of fakeness or mimicry. This is something that a lot of creatives are trying to find a balance with in terms of the work they produce. I'm also in a place where I'm constantly trying to reflect on that balance and figure out what's the best next step to take. And I've talked about how valuable I find the process of journaling and writing around my work, to always try and make sure that whatever we're engaging in, it's digging into who we actually are and still bringing forth that emotional honesty and truth that's going to allow the audience to recognize the reality of it and connect.
Like, I'm just being myself, that changes, that fluctuates. I'm evolving, I'm growing. Some periods I don't feel like embodying the SZA Lisa that is out there, so I don't. And sometimes I feel like I need to change, I need to take a step forward. So no, for me, it's not really difficult. What is difficult is if you get too much attached to the image that others created of you. That is what gets difficult.
When I was writing the script for this video, I realised as I was building it that a lot of this advice was dealing in the practical hands-on side of prospering on social media as an artist. And like SZA Lisa's talking about here, there's a lot of stuff to deal with around the more mental side and questions around what it's like to fail in public or share your art alongside the countless other things that exist in that online space. In my next video then, I'm going to be creating something of a sister discussion to this piece, looking at the more mental side of dealing with putting out our work and how we can better understand and be empowered through this. So keep an eye out for that if you want a kind of mentality or mindset backup to all this more hands-on advice. And yeah, back into the piece now.
No, I probably sound miserable. I'm so not miserable. I'm actually having a great time.
Yeah,
but I'm
well,
actually I have a lot of anxiety and it's not for fair.
Notes on failure and negativity.
Okay, the final point here is again another key backbone in terms of building momentum and success in that journey. And that's the idea of being uninterested in negativity.
We keep it light, and I feel like that's the answer. Quiet and like less.
When I was doing sport a few years back, I had a teacher who used to remind us that when you face any situation, to remember that you have a whole deck of cards in your hand that you can play. If you spent 2 months putting your illustration designs into a t-shirt company, and when you put it out, you get 0 interest, you can easily grow bitter, think that you're always going to have that same outcome, or wonder if you should actually be engaging and spending time on this anyway.
It was like 5 years of like uncertainty, turmoil, chaos, wondering if I'm good enough, wondering if I should even still be in music, because like, you know, people tell you every month when you haven't put out music in 5 years, like, oh, we forgot about you, we don't care about you, we have this person now, we don't need you anymore, blah, 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 and it's like, you believe them.
But even though those could be the most natural reactions to have to that situation, that doesn't mean we don't have the ability to take a step back and actually choose the card that's going to be most useful to play in that situation.
I'm not feeling that way anymore. I don't look at my relationships that way anymore. I want to be different in general. Like, my nervous system is shot. My cortisol levels are shot. I want to be calm. I want to be calmed. Making music from that space is changing. Something is changing in my music, and I'm noticing that.
I'm going to end now, but before I go, I wanted to leave you with that idea of trying to approach the work that you put out online with a kind of lightness, always asking yourself what this could look like if it were easy, and focusing on trying to lower the amount of options and intricacies in a project and drill down to the core of what matters and what you're trying to connect with the audience.
You become a stronger creator by eliminating things from your toolbox, really examining your process and the way that you've gotten used to it, just taking what seems like an integral core part out of your pipeline and taking it out completely and just letting it evolve in a new way.
I did a whole video on the value of setting limitations around our projects and trying to make the work that we need to do feel easier. And I'm going to link that on the screen now. Thanks as always to the patrons who make this work possible. And yeah, with all that said, peace in your work and see you next time.